Thank you. I will call to order the Rockport Select Board meeting of Monday, September 13th. We are all present this evening. The first item on our agenda tonight is a public hearing to give any interested members of the public an opportunity to comment on the amendments to the General Assistance Ordinance and the appendices A through H, which will be effective October 1st, 2021. John, did you have anything you wanted to comment on about that topic or public hearing?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a very rudimentary and standard part of operating the general assistance program. All of these maximums are given to us by the state and by a municipal, so there's nothing extraordinary or different about this process. This is just part of how you operate as a community every year to make sure that the amounts that you're able to offer those who qualify for general assistance are in keeping with what the actual costs are under the program statewide.
Are there any comments from the public in the audience this evening about general assistance? None? And John, do we see any? I know you're getting logged
None
into the
yet.
live stream. Okay, no comments yet. We'll give it a few more moments to see if there are any comments that come through.
Usually I get the email right away, so that's why it's, I'm not seeing any. You don't have any? Nope.
No,
Not
no
on this end
comments?
either.
Okay.
Nope.
All right, seeing no comments, then we will close the public hearing regarding general assistance. We'll go back into our regular scheduled agenda. The first topic we have is our town manager report. So, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Quite a bit happened. I'll try not to really go over everything. We have about 3 pages here, so that's one good part, I suppose, of having the once-a-month meeting is you get one report from me as opposed to 2. But here, there's obviously a lot of meat that we've had over the last month. I think probably the most notable items, obviously, have impacted the town office. And we had the sewer line issue that's now repaired. Everything is back up and normal, and everything's going where it should be. So that's a very nice thing. Secondly, and I guess everyone at home is noticing these, we've introduced back into our stage 2 of the pandemic policy that the town adopted and the select board adopted last November. And effectively, that just puts a mask mandate in indoor settings and tries to obviously limit the spread of COVID. And so that is something that it's been in effect for about 3 weeks now at this point, perhaps a month. And, I think there's a lot of uncomfort in trying to put this back on and deal with that in an indoor setting. But I got to give credit, the folks coming in the office, just to do their everyday business. Really, no complaints whatsoever. They just go. They see the note on the door. They turn around. They go back to their vehicle, grab their mask. Well trained and credit to, I guess, the residents and everyone coming in who just adapts on the fly. And I'll credit to our staff too, because I tried to talk with them like, "Okay, you're ready for this," and not really sure what we were going to see. But again. These folks are pros, and they reacted accordingly. So it's gone well. I was hoping that we were kind of cresting on a wave here, and we'd be back down and be able to remove these. But unfortunately, we don't seem to be moving in that direction. So in any event, that's moving ahead. Obviously, everyone probably saw their tax bills have gone out, and that's obviously a big highlight. Or low light, I suppose, depending upon your perspective. The increase is about 1.4%, which is about 24 cents over last year. We had high hopes that we could do the leveling, but unfortunately, just wasn't really possible this year. So I think that puts us a little bit lower at Camden's increase, but as you know, these things can vary wildly year over year, and that doesn't really include anything. Liens are about on task, and probably the most exciting, I suppose, effort, apart from some public work projects that are finally that will pave over the next couple of weeks is the Vulcan. So Legacy Rockport is working to restore, not to actually have it running back down the tracks, headed down to Simon's Corner, but sort of to have it looking back to its 1980s charm, I suppose, back when there weren't holes you could look through and you couldn't inspect the asbestos from above. And so Legacy Rockport has been working on that. They're seeking donations for that effort, and they're funding that, though it's a town project. Concurrently, Legacy Rockport is also working on some repointing of kiln number 2 of the 2 lime kilns. Edward Sheridan met with him last week, and he's crossed all the items off that we need to get him to work. And that's also an item. While we have $4,000 into that project from the town, from a reserve that's been established, more than 2/3 of that money is coming from Legacy Rockport. So, again, that's citizens stepping forward, who want to help out, make this town better. And these are things that aren't on, part of our budgets necessarily, obviously the 4,000, but it's a big part of us trying to move the ball forward and trying to protect these pieces of Rockport's history. So
That's great.
I think that's you don't always get to do the fun things in this job sometimes, but that's part of the toy department, I suppose, of being a town manager. So
That's great. And thanks to
Thanks.
Legacy Rockport for that. That's a big commitment, so. All right, anything else, John?
I just wondered about the increase in the taxes, if that was primarily attributable to school budget increases, or what? Because I thought we had done an even across-the-board town budget.
Well, I think that we had worked on a number of different numbers to get to that point. I think that there's a couple of things that were going on, and there's an article in Penn Bay Pilot where Carrie really clearly kind of talks about some of the issues. But with losing the valuation from a lot of those properties that were being used for doctor's offices, consolidating that property value into the Penn Bay campus, lost quite a bit of value through that process. Not to mention the regular churn we see from losing personal property taxes on a year-over-year basis.
So our denominator in terms of valuations went down
Bingo.
at a time when
At all-time
This
high,
is,
right?
it's, right,
there's
it's,
something not right, but I understand.
when I sat down, I said, this can't be, Carrie, this just can't be.
So-
And unfortunately, it was.
So, sorry, I mean,
No.
yes, we lost the doctors back into the complex on the Penn Bay property, but the buildings they were in and the property is still there. So what tax difference would there be regardless of whether there's somebody in it or not?
Well, I don't think necessarily the highest and best use follows with that, what that use is doesn't necessarily follow it with its return back to the campus. I believe we had that building on the market for about 2.7 million. And that property was recently purchased, I believe, for nonprofit use. Again, that's down the line, and that's speculative at this point. But in terms of, so take the denominator part of it out of it, and just talking about the costs. We have the school amount that, I don't even know how to phrase that, but basically the refund of the monies that we overpaid to the school district. That amount of $95,000. So we have received that, but the accounting for where that comes in the how the tax commitment is calculated, I think we had it in 2 different spots at the same time. Not to mention, we also have a number of different issues that have really nothing to do with the tax commitment, but there are the 1.4% from the numbers that we went through, all 3 of us, Carrie, myself, and Megan. Unfortunately, there wasn't a real good way around that without having an amount of overlay, which would have made certainly me very uncomfortable. Overlay being the only amount that we really have, apart from using our fund balance, to support any sort of abatements that may come down the pike. So we could have gone with a number that was at the number you had last year, But the amount of, actually, no, you couldn't have done that because your overlay, the minimum amount of overlay you had to have was above that by 1 penny. So unfortunately, it was a math equation that just didn't work equitably for us in our hopes and dreams. But I think that there's a lot more conversation that would need to be had about that denominator issue in terms of the valuation over this winter. And I think probably I'd suggest at some point, we'll probably need to have a workshop to talk about that, about where we are in valuation, where the community is in valuation. So much has happened over these last 18 months, and even before, truthfully.
Yeah.
But the value piece of this puzzle, as much good as this group can do to try to get that number where you want it, the wild variations we've seen, and if you look over that spreadsheet I'd sent over 2 weeks when we were committing taxes, again, when I was on the board in 2005, we had a mill rate of 9. And now we're almost double that number. And that's certainly not from lack of attention or lack of want, but we have to talk about those issues, and how do we get back to a place where we can not have wild swings. So it's not a great answer. I'm not even happy with that answer, to be honest with you, Mark, but it seems to be where we are at the moment.
Any other comments or questions for John? All right. Do we have any public input on non-agenda items? Anything on live stream? Nope, okay. Do we have any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none. All right, we'll move into our consent agenda, which consists of our meeting minutes, and we have several quick claim deeds, and we do have a couple of resignations from committees.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
I can only approve August 9th,
That
not
is-
the 30th.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Just a note, certainly want to thank Suzanne and Mary for their participation both on the Recreation Committee and the RES Redevelopment Task Force. With that, all in favor? Mark, did you?
I can't, as the motion was
can't,
for
that's
both
right.
dates. I mean, I just wanted to clarify that
Nope, thank you.
the 9th was the only one up ahead of the motion, which I was okay with, by the way.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, on to our action items this evening. The first one is committee applications. Michael Archer for the Recreation Committee. Is Michael here with us tonight? Oh, great. Step right up, Michael, and tell us a little bit about yourself. Thank you for coming tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. So Mike Archer, Rockport resident, big sports enthusiast. I've got 2 young kids, and my 2 kids play over the Five-Town Little League. I'm on the Five-Town Little League board, and vested interest, I'd say, in the March Jones, and happy to serve on the Rockport Rec Committee.
Great.
And maybe so I work at Camden National Bank. I'm a corporate controller there in finance accounting. So just a little bit more about myself.
Keep the budget committee in mind, too.
Beat me to it.
All right, do we have a motion for Mike Archer?
I move the board approve Mike Archer's committee application for the Recreation Committee with a term ending June 30, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Great, thank you
you.
very much. We appreciate you
Mike.
joining us. All right, next we have Doug Cole, familiar face, for committee application for the RES Redevelopment Task Force.
Good evening, Doug Cole, 103 Russell Avenue. For the RES Redevelopment Committee, when I was on the Select Board, I helped re-energize that committee, so I have an interest in it. And I heard there was an opening. It took a while and it stayed empty, so I thought I would throw my hat in the ring. I do think I have some historical background to help with that, so.
Okay.
Great, and we now have some, Amanda Dwelly, who's the chair of the task force, is enthusiastically supporting Doug's joining that committee. It's great to have you back.
Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
I'm just, I mean, with, you know me, gotta have a question for you, Doug.
Oh, yeah.
And I know your answer and you'll tell me later, but, I mean, the committee's done its work. They've made a presentation to us to which we will be placing something on the November ballot. And we keep calling it a committee, but it's a task force.
Right.
So, I mean, I suspect that after, November 2nd, the task force might no longer be in existence, so.
Oh, I don't agree. I mean, I think the task force, won't they oversee the
Well,
work of
we-
the group that's,
Possibly, yes.
That, well, as you asked that question, I actually have a whole comment on that for later, if you want, or, because coming up, the task forces, that I was gonna mention is the whole, one of Amanda's big questions is what is the role going forward? So that's something we kind of need to decide, and initially the thought is a lot of, community outreach, informing the community of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and now, why we're doing it now.
It's always good to have this after the fact of the question being asked, but
Yeah. Well,
No, there is
the answer to your question, Mark, is, fine, if the committee gets dissolved at some point in November, that's my kind of task force. But in the meanwhile, as it
No.
stands right now, there's an opening, and I'm throwing my hat in the ring
Yeah.
for it.
And just with the number of contacts that Doug has, I mean, that's a good point where you can reach out to a lot of people as well, so.
Okay.
I move the board approve Douglas Cole Committee application for the RES redevelopment task force.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you all very much. Nice to see you tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
don't send that later. Don't send that later.
All right, the next item we have is Bill, is it Bill Bow, for the Conservation Commission Committee.
Sure, my name's Bill Bowe, I'm a Rockport resident, been here since about December of 2019, just before all the fun started. And been working in a variety of different capacities as a volunteer over time, and back in early July, Bob Kennedy and Kim pinged me and said, would you like to? And I said, sure. So I spent the last 30-plus years as an environmental consultant doing subsurface work and remediation, restoration, and a little bit on the permitting side and that kind of thing. So he seemed to think it was a good fit. And Bob's talked me into monitoring a couple of lakes for him, so I get out there every couple of weeks with a fancy disc and give him the numbers. So,
Great.
anyway, I look forward to it, and I'd be more than happy to lend my now retired talents to whatever the town might need.
We appreciate that.
I move the board approve Bill Bowe committee application for a Conservation Commission committee as an associate member with a term ending June 30, 2024.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Great, thank you very much, Bill. We appreciate your joining us and your volunteer efforts. All right. The next item we have is to act on the committee membership policy. John, I will turn that to you.
Yes, so this is effectively, everything we discussed at the workshop on August 1st. This is what that looks like in text. Largely what it does is it creates that framework that I think we discussed. Try to allow these committees to operate in some sort of framework that works kind of consistently with the select board and town staff. It effectively tries to take a lot of the varied directions that some of the committees go in terms of being self-directed, and really tries to bring it back into, I suppose, I don't want to say in line, because I think that makes it seem like they're out of line, but really to try to ensure that there's more cohesion between town departments, town committees, and there's really they help each other. And in fact, the committees are aiding the departments in their work. And as opposed to maybe one extra item that's outside potentially of that committee's work, or that department's work. So that's really, this is the base for that, and then there'll be a lot of steps that would move forward that puts town staff really in the middle of working with those committees and trying to help them accomplish the tasks that they want to see, over the next years.
Okay.
I had a couple, sort of more just consistent language and
Sure.
approaches, like the minutes, under governance, it says the minutes have to be submitted to the town manager's office within 3 days of the meeting, but then draft minutes must be sent through a staff representative within 7 days. I just thought I was a little confused.
Yep.
And then we've talked about minutes, or then there could be something called a committee report form. And then on top of that, sort of who keeps the minutes. It says the secretary shall keep a permanent record, but then it goes to the town manager's office, which I frankly think is a better place for them to end up rather than in individual community members. So I guess it seemed a little onerous to say you've got to do committee reports or minutes within 3 days of a meeting to the town manager's office, but then how does the committee approve the minutes? If they've already gone to the town office, so I
Right.
wasn't sure what.
Well, just to somewhat try to answer that, I think that the challenge is that we aren't getting any minutes back,
Yeah.
right? So to put any timetable at all, to try to say, look, these need to be filed and put into a safe depository so that the work of that committee is available to general public
Yep.
as quickly as we humanly reasonably could. And so I think that's a big part of that, just to try to make sure that those committee forms or the minutes, and the idea is not to limit them, but to really to provide those committee forms as a pathway so that
Right, no, it's
it's
easier.
an
I
easier,
think that's a great idea.
just as we've done with your minutes here, it's really that same sort of concept. We check boxes, a
Right.
few short motions, and we're off. And that's really the purpose, is
Yep,
really try to simplify things. The other piece of it as well is we're trying to do some things with technology to allow things where you could just bring, whoever the committee secretary is, they can really make those minutes,
Send it.
hit save.
and
They're
they're
already at
done.
the town
They don't have to
office.
go home and.
Right,
Right,
work
they're
on
in the
it.
cloud, so they're everywhere, I guess.
which is the ideal situation.
Yes, yeah, so I think that's the direction we'd like to move.
Right.
As opposed to, scrolling them down on the notepad and then, bringing them in, because it's just harder for everyone. So we want to make it simple, want to make it easy for
Sure, no,
everybody.
I totally appreciate that, and I
Yeah.
totally understand the need. I'm not sure the language here. I think I could see committee chairs being a little confused about what they need to do. And I frankly don't know. I know on the committees I'm a liaison for, they're very religious about the minutes come out, they get reviewed, they get approved at the meeting, but then I don't know
Yeah,
if they ever go to the town office.
yeah, and I don't know that they are.
Yeah, yeah, it
You know,
sounds like that is a
And that's
missing.
I think that's part of the issue, is just trying to bring everything, we were going through the lists of individuals to prepare for the the public hearing we're going to have at the end of this month. There were a number of people who had personally told me that they had resigned from committees, but there was no record of that at the town office. So it's this, we just need to have a little bit more communication, a little more dialogue. Part of that's putting the staff in that mix and really having them work with the committees.
Yeah.
And this second piece is just obviously getting those committee report forms or minutes back. And again, I think the technology piece could be a real game changer here if we can do that. But I didn't
Yeah,
really want
so-
to, I didn't want to put that in the bylaws because
Right,
I
we're
wasn't
not
sure we were
there
ready
yet.
for prime time on
Right.
that.
Right, right. Like, I think, under page 3 of the policy, under minutes, so committee requirements, and then D, minutes. I think that's a nice way of stating it. Action shall be recorded in the form of written minutes and sent by the staff representative to the town manager's office. And you could add, within I don't know, what is an appropriate time frame.
Yeah.
But it seems like unless we don't care about the committee approving the prior minutes, they're really not final until the next meeting
It's true.
that gets approved, so.
That's true. The challenge is, of course, the month lag
Yep,
between
no,
committee meetings, right?
No, and then how do you, nobody has any access to anything that happened
Right,
in that.
so if it goes to
bureau.
someone else, even if it's in draft form,
Yeah,
I mean, technically, we could go a month, or then if they don't file the approved minutes, you know, 5 weeks since the initial action took place at the meeting. That's
Yeah.
if they took the 7 days after the subsequent meeting. So it's I know what you're saying, Denise, because it is difficult, because it does put a lot of immediacy on a committee to really deal with those
nobody
issues.
wants to be secretary of these committees anyway.
Right, exactly.
Right,
It's
it does
already
not make it
pulling teeth.
easier.
You can get chairs and vice chairs, but getting a secretary is.
Yeah, yeah.
But, I mean, I understand from the town's perspective the importance of having a record of what is happening.
And I would say maybe if this went into effect and there was 14 days seemed better, or there was, people were following this trend and they still complained about it, I think the issue is there's no follow-up, there isn't any sort of line for anyone. And so it's
Right.
really up to the other members of the committee, and that's a difficult task for a committee member to be put in that position sometimes.
Yeah,
So,
no, I agree with that.
I suppose I'm the bad guy in this instance, so.
Okay, so right now it reads that the committee reports or minutes should be sent within 3 days. But it talks about reports or minutes, but then the next sentence says committees may complete traditional meeting minutes. Is that the same as the minute? I'm on page 5,
Oh, okay.
5B, governance, B. And then it says committees
Within
may
7
complete
days.
traditional meeting minutes, and then you get 7 days, but we've already said they could do minutes or reports, but those have to be in 3 days.
Right.
So that, to me, I just don't know.
It's just confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you could offer one or the other. My concern was
Were you
that-
trying to differentiate, like, sentence 1 is just about committee reports?
Correct.
And not minutes?
Correct,
So it would just read committee reports.
right.
Within 3 days,
So,
and then they can complete traditional meeting minutes.
Right,
And you get 7 days to do those.
exactly.
so something along the lines of within 48 hours of your minutes being approved, being turned over to your office.
Because that shouldn't take any work on
No,
their
I mean,
end,
'cause
just
all you-
then they're-
I mean, they'll have their
Right.
meeting, they approve it, and either that day or within 48 hours, whatever you pick,
Right,
then it should be dropped off to you, and that way you eliminate all of your other days that you're talking about.
yeah, I mean, the only challenge is I would want a copy of draft minutes at the
Right, you
office.
want that first one.
So like, even if they're not approved, you know what I mean?
Right, you want that draft within 7 days is what you're
Right,
saying.
of the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even unapproved.
Okay.
All right.
Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, because you're saying such draft sent through the town office within 7 days.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to simplify it as one timetable for all, that's fine. I
I
was
think
trying
that
to.
might make more,
I think we should do that, do
Yeah.
one timetable for all.
and make it the 7 days.
Within the
would
7
be-
days, either your report, your draft
Yep.
minutes, whatever, but those are the requirements within 7 days.
Yeah.
And that probably makes it easier for you, then you're not following up who sent me a report, who sent me minutes, who
Right.
sent me whatever.
Yeah, that's,
So you'll rewrite this governance section, section B, to just note committee reports, minutes, et cetera, within the 7 days.
yeah.
So I think we can still, did you have other questions, Denise?
I had
I'm
one other
sorry.
thing on,
Yep.
I think, on page 4, and this is under task forces. So we've generally been having everything go to the town manager's office, but here we say, it's the last 2 sentences at the bottom of the page, and it's really the last one. The secretary shall maintain a permanent record of all task force meetings and all correspondence of the task force. But we don't really want, I mean, that's fine, but what we really want is you guys to have that.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think that it's really trying to give a job description as opposed to a responsibility. But I think I could see the distinction there might be.
I would think you'd
unhelpful.
want to add something, because, right, I don't think the task force provision talks about when they have to send in the minutes.
maybe you add that to the bottom, which shall be sent to the town manager within 7 days.
There we
Take
go.
that same
If you
language.
take that same language there,
Yeah. Because if we're trying to get everything centralized, which I
Yep.
think makes total sense. And then I had, page 6. So, and this could just be some language, anyway, under B, required bylaw language, under meetings, it says, meeting minutes shall be recorded and publicly available. And would we just say meeting minutes or committee report form, or have we turned the committee report form into a sort of a, so I'm on
I'm sorry, which one are
page
you on?
6,
Yep.
required bylaw language.
Okay, yep.
Little I, 2 little i's. And that, mostly, we did a pretty good job of saying minutes or report, minutes or report.
Yep. I think you're right. Yeah, that should probably
Just to
also
be-
include that, yeah.
And then one other thing, and implementation, alternate committee members, implementation, little I, duties and responsibilities. Oops. Guess we got 2 little i's, but anyway. Here, for the first time, we use the term board, commission, and committee chair, because we do have all these, we have committees, but we also have, they have different titles, but we've generally just used committee as our default. I think it'd be cleaner to just say, and as requested by the committee chair, and not all of a sudden throw in these other kinds of, because I know the ZBA is a board, and the planning board is a board, and then we've got the Conservation Commission, but we haven't otherwise in all of this language and this
Those
policy
terms.
called those 3 different forms of our committees out. We've generally just referred to committees, but we mean all of those.
Yeah, so in applicability, on page 3,
Right,
where it says the policies herein apply to committees and boards of the town of Rockport unless specified within the bylaws of that board or committee.
yep,
So I was trying to just say, look, this is a one-stop shop for all of those. Did not specify commissions.
no,
but-
and all I'm saying
but-
is this one provision
Yeah,
brings all those in, and I would just say, and as requested by the committee chair, just delete board, commission.
got it, yep.
Okay, that's it.
okay. So we know we have some changes on that, which, John, you've captured. I've captured in my notes too, if you want them. All right, with those changes, can we get a motion?
I move the board adopt the committee membership policy as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor? Okay, thank you. All right, now we are on to the general assistance ordinance and appendices. John, I know this is what we talked about at the public hearing. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think the main thing I would look at is, I would just turn everyone's attention to the overall maximums. I just always do this whenever anyone wants to understand really what GAA means. If you go to that sheet, the one really with everything on it, that upper left-hand corner, it talks about the overall maximums. A single person by themselves, $800 is the maximum that effectively that person could live on to qualify for general assistance, under that amount.
Oh.
801, you're over. So when people talk about what sort of programs are available for folks and how do you live, imagine living on $800 a month. It's unbelievable. And I've had the opportunity and the responsibility to be a GA administrator for about, 15 years or so. And, there's a lot of people out there who are trying to do the best thing and trying to do their best and get through. And the best thing about a program like General Assistance, and we've in Rockport, we've had a decrease because of so much of this federal money that has really gone to help people through the pandemic. But this program, it really is it's meant to be for a very short time. But just think about what it would take to qualify
Right.
for a program like this. It's, a family of 5 living on $1,400 a month.
Wow.
Try to find a rent for $1,400 a month.
Exactly.
Never mind all the other expenses. So I just always like to bring that up because, we talk about the program, but really, what does that mean? And for 800, someone on their own at $800 a month that's a pretty tough way to live. And so that's why we have this program, and it's a great program. There's pros and cons to it, but this is really our best weapon to try to fight people who are in a really bad way, so.
And it's a difficult job
It is,
to be the administrator, so
yes.
it's a lot of sad stories that come with that, so. Okay, do we have a motion?
I move the board approve the general assistance ordinance and appendices A through H as presented.
Second?
I think you have to add that. I'm sorry, John, was that a second from you?
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion?
They do.
Eric, yep.
I'm just trying to find the spot. Now, I know this is kind of a generic, this is what it is sort of thing, but then when you're looking on C1 and it says should only consider adopting if these figures are consistent with local rent values, and then you look at Knox County, numbers,
Yeah.
where are you finding apartments that run for those numbers? I mean, I've seen apartments up to $1,800 for a 1-bedroom.
Exactly.
So, I mean, hopefully these people that are looking for this assistant aren't in an $1,800 apartment, but when those are the only apartments available, they probably are. So what recourse do we have to say, yeah, these are kind of like way not in market?
Right.
Says we'd need to conduct a market survey.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't even that many real apartments in our town. I mean, there are a few, but, a lot of them are people renting houses and a space within their house. I mean, we do have some. And I was hoping to get to that today, but unfortunately I didn't get to make phone calls to ask what their average rents were, because I kind of wanted more information for this today, but
Right.
and that's really my concern here. I mean, if we go by this and then, I mean,
And who
if you're-
prepared these numbers? Is this an MMA?
Yep.
Yep.
So there's an MMA ordinance, which is basically blessed by the Department of Health and Human Services. It's about yay thick.
Yeah,
That really governs the ins and outs of how general assistance works. And just to provide a little bit of a how it works situation, you have a general assistance administrator, Diane's our GA administrator, and Linda is our backup. And, while when you have a lot of cases, which we are not having right now, thank goodness, for a number of different reasons, but when you have a lot of cases, you build that experience. But when you don't, the beautiful part is the Department of Health and Human Services, they have staff available through the workday to talk you through these issues. Because obviously you're sitting down with somebody and you're working through their budget with them. You're working through every bill, every utility, everything, okay, where are you working? Where'd you last work? Do you have, where are you, where are you finding food? Are you able to, do you have any other loans and credit card debt? I mean, you're basically sitting down and you're working through their whole financial history, to really see if they're eligible. And then the second time, if they come back a second time, you're looking to see how did that change? Have you applied for work? What other conditions did you put on the first expense to try to help them off of the situation they're in? And then you see that sheet, and you're like, where do you find those rents? Now, the way it often works is that's what they can fund is that amount of it. So you're right. If you're an $1,800 rent place, and it's a 2-bedroom, let's say, you're getting half of it, but that's not enough. Obviously, where does $900 leave you if you're short $900 and you can't even make $800 or something like that as a single person? The math is not in your favor on so many different levels. So I think you're right, and it also brings to mind the other question, which is the issue of housing in this area, right? Like, where are we going to find a way for people? People are struggling,
Yep.
but even people who are making it or barely making it, you know, workforce housing and things like that, how are we ever going to, you know, get to a point where people can live and work in a community like this of all types?
Right.
So it's amazing. This is one of those things that's often just kind of a rubber stamp. When you start digging into it, just as we are now, you really start talking about some of these issues that really talk about how your town works or doesn't, and how it's really impacting everybody. So it's, I don't know the answer to that, Eric. I don't know how you solve it. I mean, you can do a market study, and obviously you can adjust these rates, but, you know, this is definitely the boilerplate of all boilerplates.
Yeah.
Because the law is so specific and what DHS will allow you to pay for. Because it's really a state program that's run by the town.
Yeah, well, yeah, I just, you know, I'm reading it and just going, okay, how's anybody supposed to do anything with this? I mean, I realize if you're only earning $800 a month or under, then yeah, the assistance is great. If you're living somewhere that maybe your rent's 400 with a friend or something, but,
Which is gonna be rare.
but if you're not, I mean, yeah, that's help, but it's only,
Right.
I mean, and I realize there's nothing we can really do, it's a state program, but, you know, I wanted to bring it up and
It's a good question.
say,
No, it's a really good
I
question.
don't understand all this, so,
Yeah.
all right.
Any other questions? Nope. All in favor? Okay. Thank you. All right, we will move on to the check disbursement policy. John, I will turn to you.
Yeah, so this is the bones of this were from a policy that I had in Newcastle. I gave it to Megan, and she I didn't think there was any red ink left in my printer anymore, because she was able to go through that and cut out all the fat. But effectively, the idea here is it really simplifies the warrant process in that while you have an authorized select board member, and then, you know, a second person if that person's unavailable, this policy allows us to release the checks that are a necessity for us to avoid, you know, perhaps finance charges. We have contractual obligations to pay within a certain date, utility bills. And really, most importantly, and the one that kind of drove this to the surface is that, you know, when we have our our weekly Bureau Motor Vehicle reports, those really have to go without haste all the way to Augusta. And so, you know, obviously, I don't think there's ever been a select board member in 15 years of my doing this that's ever questioned why we wouldn't write that check to BMV. And so that's really, these are all meant to be really innocuous, you know, things you would never question. It's more a question of just making sure that the board has, you know, blessing for those to move on and allows us to avoid finance charges whenever they appear.
I mean, I talked to my counterpart to see if there was a recollection of any issues that have come up, and I personally have never been made aware. And I know that on several occasions, there's been 2 or 3 times that you've been called in the run of a week to sign things. So am I under the assumption that for the lacking of a select board member's signature, yours will be the second one on it?
Well, so I already signed the warrants at
Well,
present.
it goes from Megan to you, so
Right.
she's gonna sign it and give it to you.
Right,
So yours for the second
yeah,
will be on there
that's right,
lacking hours
right.
In-
2 out of 3,
in an emergency.
For this limited
This
group.
type.
indeed. That's, yeah, that's exactly right, yeah. And I'm sure there's been times checks have gone because it's the right thing to do, and no one here would ever have said otherwise. But I always like, if it's something we already agreed to, we might as well have it written out, just in case, so no one's feeling slighted or left out or anything along the way.
So to add to that, after it has been signed by the both of you, it goes into the box for further review, even though it's been paid? In other words, when either one of us go in and pick up the warrants to be signed, it'll be in that box with those warrants so that we can at least look at it?
Oh, yeah.
An after-the-fact thing?
Yeah, because it says here, prior to final signature on the warrant by the select board designee.
right.
So I'm assuming that means
still a
it
final
will still go
signature,
through the process.
Yes.
Meaning that Mark or Denise will
Yeah.
sign, but there are things that you need to get out ahead of time, or you might have to get your BMV in sooner
Right.
than, okay.
And just as a for instance, in Newcastle, the board looks at the warrants at the meeting and signs them at the meeting, all 5 members of that select board. So somewhat, that's held on to that in that the check's released, but the warrant still comes back before the board. Here, we have a little bit of a different process, but if we had to release that check on a Thursday and you come in to sign on Friday, no problem, you
Right.
know, but
But you're still gonna see it.
you're
Yeah.
still gonna see it, absolutely, yeah.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move the board adopt the check disbursement policy as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Of course.
Yes, go ahead.
Under F for contractual payments for services, it's kind of a little vague, almost, like what contractual obligations? I mean, such as, somebody doing Route 1 sewer extension's a contractual obligation. But, are we talking the printer lease, or are we talking,
The guy that's bush hogging the side of your road,
Right.
how
Right.
vague is that? I mean, what,
Well, a lot of contracts that we sign is, we have to pay by a certain date, right?
all right, of course.
So the idea is to make sure that we don't want to be null and void of our contract if for some reason we pay on the 3rd as opposed to the 1st, as per contract. So we want to make sure that we're fulfilling our faith, and credit into that contract if we can. You could certainly change that to account for,
Normal and regular.
dates.
But it also says the following types of expenditures must await final approval, and those are payments not due prior to the next scheduled expenditure warrant. So you're really just talking about the 6 days, and it has to be a due date under that contract that you would otherwise
Right.
miss.
Right, that's true. Yeah,
Which I would think would be sort of rare.
I would hope so.
Okay, so do we need that spelled out further, or,
I'd like it a little more clear,
okay?
but I don't know, because to me, that's just kind of,
So maybe as
Vague.
contractual payments due prior, so we use the same language, due prior to the next scheduled warrant,
I mean,
or,
when I think of that, we go in on Thursdays traditionally, and as I said, we have done other days when needed. So if you go in on a Thursday and you get a bill on Friday that comes in, and it has to be paid before the next Thursday, that would be that exception.
right,
But I don't know.
so it
I mean,
should be rare,
That's
I
what I
just
think.
don't
Right.
know how often that happens.
Right.
right, so maybe if you just use that language, that it's contractual payments for services due prior to the next, scheduled
To
warrant.
repeat below. so that
Right,
it's
right,
very
it's the
clear.
same thing, so
Yeah,
basically,
I
you're
suppose.
using that rare scenario of Mark signed Thursday, we get a bill Friday, it's due Monday for whatever reason, and then we don't wanna hold it, we wanna
Yeah.
get it paid, so, would that work for you?
yeah, it's just,
I might put my lawyer hat on with that.
Yes, go ahead.
Just because because really this, Roman 4A is meant to apply to
All of them.
all of those categories. So if we start calling out one category alone with that special language, are you saying that that doesn't then apply to the other? I mean, I know we're not.
Right, I
That's
don't-
not our
yeah.
intention, but that would be sort of legally, some of the ways that courts interpret things is they would say,
Mhm.
well, but wait a minute.
no, I agree with that. We've already got it in 4A, so I don't think we need to repeat it in F. It was just my concern of, are we talking printer leases and the water cooler, or are we talking about we're, you know, surfacing Old County Road or
Gotcha, okay.
Old Rockland, whatever the street is there they've been working on.
And are you thinking like some sort of dollar threshold would help on that, or?
No, I mean, I
Ordinary
see this as,
customary.
okay, we know how things are running now, but, you know, if you have a turnover at some point, then you'd have to remember to go back and quickly redo this, removing that authority until we're comfortable again with whoever ends up taking your place in 3, 5, 10, 15 years or whatever it is.
Never.
Never.
Yeah, that's
Never.
out here.
Life appointment.
No, but you know what, you
I
know what
do,
I'm
I
saying
do, I
is,
do.
you're kind of leaving it a little bit
Right.
open, you know, and I realize it's still getting approved, and Megan's looking at it, you're looking at it, great and wonderful, it's just that little bit
So
of,
is your concern the kind of like ordinary and everyday things like leases
Yeah.
or the printer versus a big construction
Right.
project that the town is, so that's this, it's not the dollar amount you're looking for a threshold on,
It's the
it's
type.
more.
yeah, I mean, well, you know, if he's writing a $400 check, great, but if he's writing a $4 million check,
So maybe there is a threshold that you,
you know, and I guess that's just me being an accountant for so many years is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, okay, I can sign a check up to $5,000, but after that, it better go to somebody else.
Yeah.
is there a number that would make sense in that?
I mean, nothing stands out in my mind. I hadn't really thought of it under that, you know, scenario.
Because most of our contracts would be like 30-day terms. and
Right.
It would
Right.
seem hard to believe that we would,
It's probably such a small
I mean,
chance.
Yeah,
I mean,
realize
this
it's
is,
normal,
I mean,
so-
Yeah, but
truthfully,
no,
this
but we
was,
should
this
address
was,
it.
this came about because so many of you were on vacation. And that was a great thing, and you should be able to go to vacation, by the way. That you should be able to go to, you know, wherever you need to go. It's just,
we don't
There
want
are
to stop
things-
the town from doing
Right.
its business.
Right.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And if we, you know, unfortunately, those the BMV and inland fisheries and those,
Oh, yeah, I don't think
There's no
anyone's
playing around with
questioning
that,
those.
right?
No, we want
So
to make
it's-
sure those are
So
taken
it's
care of.
really F.
It's
that
just
Eric
F.
is
it's
saying.
That's
not meant to open up, you know, like you said, let's write the whole sewer bill.
Right.
The whole, you know, the whole cost of the sewer
Yeah,
extension in one,
Let's not talk
you
about
know,
that.
that's not the point.
No,
So,
I get it. It was just something that kind of, I
are
read
you
it and I
okay,
just
are you
went,
okay keeping it in? Do you want
No,
it
it's-
revised? What
no,
are
we
you
can-
feeling?
We'll just leave it as
Okay.
is. I mean, 4 covers it pretty much. It says, you know, before.
What you won't do, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if something happens and there happens to be a change, I just think this is something that whoever is here needs to immediately
Mm-hmm.
review.
Yep,
You know, it's not something we want to forget about.
Yeah.
good point. All right, any other discussion items? All right, all in favor? Okay, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is the special town meeting warrant, the referendum. All right, so John,
What we have here is effectively 4 articles, only 2 which will require your recommendation votes tonight. And I can go, do you want me to go one by one, and or do you want to read them? Or
do
how-
we
how do you
have
want
to vote on them one by one? Or do we do it as a packet as presented?
Well, in terms of the approval of the warrant, that's 1 vote. In terms of the actual recommendation votes,
Yep,
I think those are handled on a one-by-one basis, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So, and my question would be, having not been involved in the August 30th, but having read the material, are we still okay with me voting on approving or not? Sort of looking for, that would be a yeah, I can.
Yeah,
I
well,
believe we
it's up to the
are,
board.
right?
I mean, I don't see, this is
Yeah, no, no,
I think a
I'm-
recommendation,
yep.
so,
Because that was just to draft the language,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The first meeting, so this would be to actually vote if we.
Put it on.
Okay. All right, so, shall we go through,
Yeah, don't we have to read these?
I think we do have to read them one by one.
Can I start with number 1
Yes, you go right ahead.
and work our way down?
No.
To elect a moderator to preside at said meeting.
All right, so at this point, do we need to vote on that, or do
No.
we, okay, we don't, okay.
You can vote on the whole warrant
When we're
once at
done.
the end. You
Okay.
can just vote on your recommendation votes after you read Article 2, I would say.
Okay. Eric, would you like to
Yes.
read Article 2?
Sure. Shall the town authorize the select board to enter into a contract with engineering and design professionals to prepare documents for future consideration of a new fire station in West Rockport on terms and conditions that the select board determined to be in the best interests of the town?
Okay, so we need to vote on that. Okay, so do we do an all in favor vote? Do we have to do a motion?
I
Do we have to
think-
do?
Probably a roll call of, or you could say how many
Okay.
for, against, abstain.
Okay. How many for? 5 for. 0 against. Okay? Article 3, shall the town authorize the select board for a sum not to exceed $35,000 from the town's unassigned fund balance to enter into an agreement with the New Height Group for the purposes of providing a market survey to evaluate developmental feasibility, develop a conceptual site program, and to work with professionals to create conceptual renderings for the former Rockport Elementary School site on terms and conditions that the select board determined to be in the best interests of the town to maximize the value of the property to benefit Rockport taxpayers. All in favor? 5 for, 0 against. Denise, would you like to do Article 4?
Sure. Shall the following amendment to Section 405 of the town's land use ordinance be enacted? Section 405 is amended to read, "No land use regulation or amendment thereof shall be adopted until after the Select Board of the Town of Rockport has held a public hearing thereon at least 10 days before it is submitted to the legislative body for consideration. Public notice of the hearing shall be made at least 7 days prior to the hearing. Amendments to this ordinance shall be considered following a citizen petition pursuant to Article 2, Section 14 of the Rockport Town Charter, recommendation of the planning board, or motion of the select board. Petitioners are encouraged to work with and request assistance from the planning board so that proposed changes and amendments can be of greatest benefit to the citizens of Rockport. Petitioners shall be responsible for paying for all required advertisements and notifications."
All right, and Article 5, John, would you like to take that one?
Shall an ordinance amending the Town of Rockport Land Use Ordinance in Section 700 Zoning Board of Appeals be enacted? A copy of the ordinance is on file with the town clerk.
Okay, and with that,
So, and this wouldn't affect our vote on the warrant, but I wondered when we talk about the Budget Committee 3-3 vote on the RES side, is that where you're headed, Eric, with your emails?
Somewhat.
When is that? time we
We
wanna
got a
talk
section
about
for, committee liaison,
you want to do that,
Do it through the
committee
liaison
liaisons?
reports?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. that's fine
Okay,
with me.
so do we have a motion for the special town meeting warrant overall?
I move the board approve the special town meeting warrant as presented.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor? 5, thank you. 6:58. Okay. Next, we are moving on to accepting a gift from the Cole family. So John, do you have the details on that you'd like to share?
Yes, our recently departed new member of the RES task force, Doug Cole, contacted me about 2 weeks ago or so. And he had been in conversation with Tom Jackson, Jackson Landscape Services. As everyone who has ever driven by the Memorial Park and the library, I don't know, over the last 6 months, they've probably seen Doug watering and tending to plants and garden beds and the like. And Doug obviously sees that there is a need for these new plants to have a chance to prosper. It's very difficult to do so on volunteer efforts as robust as they have been on these Parks and Beautification Committee's watch. And also just as individual citizens, it's very difficult to do that without experts at hand. So Doug, prior to having talked with me, had reached out to Tom Jackson and received a quote for the purposes of taking care of these beds over the course of the next basically full calendar year. So my suggestion to him was allow me to write up something that would put that into effect, but only upon receipt of a gift in the appropriate amount or corresponding amount. So the idea is the gift tonight would be a gift in the amount of $7,500 from Doug and Pat Cole. Graciously, thank you, thank you. The idea would be that would fund phase 1 of this program, which would work from effectively today's date until June 30, the end of this fiscal year. At which point, prior to that July 1, for phase 2, Doug would then return and offer a second gift if he wishes to see phase 2 continue. If so, any unused funds would be combined to reduce the total amount for the second phase, which is $7,000. But all you're concerned with this evening is that initial gift of $7,500. The contract itself is basically written to account for both phases. But if at any point the board chooses not to accept the gift, the contract it becomes null and ends. So the purpose of this is really just to build this relationship, to put professionals involved in the care and maintenance of these garden beds and these kind of early stages of their plant life. And then we would obviously talk about on an ongoing basis that once they've established themselves as part of our regular care and maintenance of all the parks, and how we do that in our annual operating budget. That's something we'll have to certainly discuss this winter, for sure.
I move the board accept the gift from Doug and Pat Cole in the amount of $7,500 and direct the town manager to draft an agreement with Jackson Landscape Services for maintenance of the plant beds at the library and Memorial Park.
Second.
And I can't say enough about how generous this is.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Step forward and do this for
Any
us.
discussion?
And Jonathan, you touched on it. I mean, it's something that, the example that's being set by the Memorial Park and the library work and how beautiful it looks, those are the types of things that need to be done throughout other places, within the town. So it certainly will have to be, and it shouldn't be necessarily given to the mowing contract. It probably ought to be something separate and by itself, by somebody that can do it in a good professional manner.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Great. Very generous, and thank you very much, Doug and Pat. Okay, the next item on the agenda is act on the Budget Committee bylaws. So, Mr. Duke?
Yeah, this is really the only change here is to account for the capital planning efforts as part of the budget committee section. Again, credit to Megan to spend the time to put this text together for the budget committee and to work through this with them. It's a tricky thing here because obviously I think in discussing this, and we talked about this at the workshop, it makes a lot of sense to have the budget committee involved in capital planning. The challenge was, how do you meld an appointed committee with a group that's elected by the voters and ensure that everyone has, their say? And so that was, the compromise, that was drafted is the idea of having a 1-year appointment to this group. So that way there's speaking rights and all the rest, but you can't mix voting rights of elected individuals and appointed individuals. You want to make sure the appointed individuals have their opportunity, but the elected officials are there for a purpose, and you have to put primary, status for their vote. So the budget committee discussed this and approved this unanimously.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move the board approve the budget committee bylaws as presented.
Second?
Any discussion?
I'm just glad it went well, that things have moved forward.
Yep.
Great. All in favor? Okay, unanimous. 7:04. Okay, next item up is the Recreation Committee bylaws.
I won't steal Eric's thunder to talk about the Recreation Committee, but I'll only say that for one, kudos to the fact that they have bylaws, because they were one of our outlaw committees that did not have bylaws, and if they still live. But effectively really looking at the purpose, and trying to sharpen that focus. A lot of good work is being done with the Rec Committee, and really trying to move that forward. But this is just sharpening that purpose so that, again, as we talked about in our workshop, trying to get everyone working really in a narrower focus. And I think everyone's really excited to get started.
Yeah.
I had one sort of just niggle under section 4, meetings. The second sentence says, meetings may be called at the discretion of the chair, fire chief, or town manager, or upon the request of most of the committee. Do we mean like a majority?
A majority. And can,
Quorum, maybe?
Quorum?
Yeah,
Or a
probably.
majority, yeah, I think
Yeah.
Something-
Do-
majority of the voting
do
members.
quorum, and can you put a space between the F and the O, between
Yes.
fire chief and town manager?
And we still didn't get the period on the first paragraph, section 1.
Section 1, after town manager, we need a period. All
And
right.
is this because Jason just really cares about rec? It just seems odd to have the fire chief in charge of this.
Well, this is part of really sort of looking at the committee structures and putting the department heads and moving the responsibilities around. I mean, we had, Mike Young was our staff person for this committee.
That's who you'd think, but of
Right,
course,
but he had 5 other committees.
exactly.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to do is again, we're all trying to narrow our focus, so we're taking care of everything.
So instead of calling out
Yeah.
specifically fire chief, should we put staff liaison? Because that
Yeah.
could
I
change.
think
Let's
that's
leave that open.
better.
I think
Yeah,
that's a
I
great
think,
idea.
I think
Yeah.
if you put staff liaison on any of these kind of going forward too,
And then that's up to you who you. appoint.
exactly, because then that
Yeah.
could change tomorrow, right? You could
Yeah.
realign them based on
Exactly.
your,
Yeah, it looks
prerogative.
like we've got a lot of car crashes that have taken up a lot of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was one of my thoughts at the
Yeah.
meeting itself, was it really shouldn't say fire chief.
Yeah.
Because it may not be.
right.
Well, it says work closely with the staff liaison, comma,
Yeah.
currently the fire chief.
Or, yeah, either way, but I
So
think,
it could be anybody.
Yeah.
It happens to be this person right now.
Right.
But
And
I
I
think-
said, well, it could always be changed.
right.
And this might be a breach of protocol, because I'm pretty process-oriented, but Mike is already the chair of our committee, even though we just appointed him now. So, he gave me a thumbs up, so I think we're okay to make this change.
Okay.
All
Yeah, you'll
right.
have to go back, I guess, to the committee.
Do we have a motion?
I move the board approve the recreation committee bylaws as presented.
Or as
As
amended?
amended.
Okay,
Sorry.
nope, no problem. Do I have a second?
Second?
All right, any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. 5 in favor, 708. All right, thank you. All right, let's move on to the citizens' request to amend the land use ordinance for wireless technology facility.
Yes. So, I received a phone call from James Billow, who is representing the US Cellular in their bid to place a cell tower in Rockport. Their proposed location is off Vinyl Street, which currently is not a location our land use ordinance allows for the placement of wireless telecommunication systems, facilities, excuse me. And Mr. Bell and I had a great conversation. I explained to him that we have a process, and certainly glad to work with him through that process. That certainly can make application to the planning board and follow that process, but if they wish to pursue a change of the ordinance, we need to follow that process. Now, part of that process, as we just read in our, oddly enough, that's on our warrant, is that the select board can make change and add items to the warrant. However, as we all know, on the 30th of August, we met, and you made decisions to place those 4 items on the warrant. So our charter, I spoke with our town attorney, and Phil's recommendation was, our charter requires that you provide them this opportunity, this hearing, to hear their request. However, state law really doesn't provide us the opportunity to place that item on a warrant to be voted on in November at this point in time. So my recommendation to you is to take the request, deny the opportunity to place that on November's ballot, but forward their request to the Ordinance Review Committee as potentially portion of their work plan for this winter. And that way,
And then
that
how
process
will
can
that work? So, because we don't have the flexibility of putting something on a warrant at this point, based on time frame.
Right.
So if we send this back to the ordinance review, then it will go through the channels of then coming back to us
right,
potentially for the next election,
Right,
right?
right.
In June.
right.
Okay,
Or
just
at any
wanted
other
to-
time, I mean, you could have a
Okay.
special meeting at
Uh-huh.
any point. You know, Mr. Bello and the applicants for the US Sailor meeting, for anyone who was participants in that with the planning board, they were obviously quite concerned, and just so that everyone here understands, you know, again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have to say that, but as I understand the Telecommunications Act of 1996, we have very limited opportunities where the towns can limit where and how towers can be placed. We had an ordinance that the town worked on in the early 2000s that worked quite well. US Cellular's case is they believe that there's a pocket that is unserved or underserved, and there's some question as to whether or not, if that's the case, that does allow, in some cases, that it can override, courts can override local ordinances. And obviously, that's not something the town would want to have. We want to work with and
Absolutely.
find something that works for our residents, for applicants, follows the law, follows federal law, establishes ordinance that makes sure the rules are same for everybody. And so that process needs to occur. And so that's why I'm recommending you all send this through the ordinance review process, and then it can come back to you fully vetted, and
Well-
everyone will be happy. in the end.
Well, in that case, I move the board deny the request from US Cellular to place an article on the November 2021 ballot and refer the request to the Ordinance Review Committee for inclusion in their work plan.
Second?
any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Okay. Moving on, do we have any discussion items? Seeing none. We will move into our wastewater commissioners. So we will move to wastewater commissioners. I know we have Nate here.
I move the board exit regular session and enter wastewater commissioners.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you.
I move the board,
Oh, hold on.
I move the board.
Hold on,
I know, I feel like
Right
that's-
on
hold
going.
on, keep going.
Sorry.
All right. Okay, John.
Well, since the conversation began with my goals and the board and working, what are the next steps? One of those items that has seemed to rise, and obviously a lot of this is coming about with infrastructure bills and ARPA funding and all this sewer. It's really been really something we spent a lot of time on, just to connect the line at the town office. But Megan, myself, Nate, and Orion met a little over a week ago, I think, and in the Richardson room. But we've been talking and working on this for the last, I'd say, month or so. But really seriously over the last, last week. And that makes it sound like it's a new idea, but anyone who's been talking about Route 90 sewer, that's a conversation that's going back 20-plus years at this point. And I'll probably stop and turn it over to Nate and or Megan. But this, what Nate's provided us with, provides us the jumping off point, I think, for the next phase in this, which is, okay, what does this look like? What does this really mean? Other than an idea, other than a goal that seems to make a lot of sense, seems to be the right time, realistically, what is possible and what is real and what is imaginary? And I think this is a great opportunity, and it also sets us up for that EDA grant process that did not go in our favor with the Route 1 project, but we are well placed, I think, to take advantage of that for the Route 90 project. There's a number of different items that are somewhat interesting and carrots that are out there, not just in EDA, but some other items that we'll maybe get into. But there are a lot of opportunities that make a lot of sense to connecting that Route 90 corridor and a little bit beyond. So, Nate,
Nate,
you
Megan?
want to talk about what the plan
Can I just
is,
ask a
or?
quick question in terms of, because I had heard, I mean, obviously this is all new,
Yeah,
but I'd heard, I think maybe Mark had mentioned that there had been work done in the past
yeah,
on this subject.
yeah.
Is there something substantive that was done, or just some general discussion?
I would turn that probably to Nate, because I think he's probably worked on it 20 years ago or so, and it probably could answer that a little bit better. I know it's something that, as part of the comp plan 2004, it was something we had discussed on the board greatly about the need to have that connection with West Rockport. But in terms of plans, I don't really have a history with that.
Come on up, Nate.
Well, thank you for having me. You've got quite an appetite for sewer extensions, considering your Route 1 project is still ongoing. Yeah, so I guess I don't know where to start. I mean, the sewer on Route 90's been talked about for 2 decades, just in my experience, and I'm not sure how much longer before that. So really, as John mentioned, the impetus for the discussion now is there seems to be a combination of attractive funding that's out there, both within the stimulus package that's still taking shape. The primary funding source we've sort of been keyed in on is the Economic Development Administration, EDA. You'll hear it called. We had hoped for their participation on the Route 1 project. That didn't work out, largely on kind of timing on when they came forward, as that collided with the timing that we needed to move the project forward. So in a conversation with the folks at EDA, they were sort of apologetic that it didn't work out, but indicated that, hey, maybe the timing is right to look at your next highest priority. So that was Route 90. Now, when you then combine that with what maybe some of the potential uses of that sewer might be as you go out Route 90, and having not been part of planning board discussions or not, I don't know how much I want to get into that here, because I know sometimes those conversations can be sensitive, but I'll just say that you have some proposed development out on Route 90, specifically at the Route 90, Route 17 intersection, that could be very favorable to the community. Some of the things you talked about here tonight as you were going over your GA and general assistance program and workforce housing and
Right.
stuff like that. So, but then, as what often happens with economic development, word gets out, and then other entities also then quickly come forward and say things like, "Oh, if you're doing sewer out there, I might also be interested." And sometimes you can predict what those might be, and other times they kind of fall out of the sky. So it's, as I've talked to, a string of town managers here in Rockport about sewers going out Route 90, I I talked to John about it recently, and what we agreed was, as opposed to keep it as concept, where I might wave my arms around, which I'm good at doing, I would add, but as I might wave my arms around and say, well, I think it's gonna cost this, it's really seemed like it was time to investigate what that project would look like, size, scope, cost, how it might influence discussions you're having around interlocal agreements as you look at what the flows and loads might be from that extension, funding sources, how you might phase it, really get into the details of how you'd move that project forward in much more detail than just the conversation we've had about it over the years. So that's really what this proposal here in front of you tonight looks to propose, that document that works through all those details. I think maybe Mark was the only one here in 2014 when I was here talking about this similar effort for the Route 1 project.
Yeah.
So this becomes that first formal step you take that really, I guess, it's the skin in the game, right? It's to show that the community's invested in the project. You want to start investing in the planning efforts and really create a path forward if you decide at the end of the planning effort that it is a project you're still interested in. The product that we would create is what's simply called a preliminary engineering report, and the structure of the preliminary engineering report would be very specific towards the requirements that EDA and funding agencies like that would want to see you capture, and there's some guidance out there and that directs us on how what we have to put in that report. So
And Nate, I think you're sort of answering my question, but there's nothing substantive that's yet been done in terms
I
of this
think,
corridor.
I think there was. I think there was initially some plans thought of, but not gone much further than where it would be, where the pump station would be on a piece of property that we own, and some similar, simple things like that. So I think there's a really thin bit of information about what and where, but none of the further testing that I think Nate is talking about to get in more into the meat of it, so to speak.
So we could at least find that, and,
Well,
I mean, you guys must have done it, right? Who else would have?
I think, because my recollection, Steve Beveridge might give us a bit of history, but he was here at the time. And either we would have in our records with Wood and Kern, or perhaps you guys would, that initial information. Because I think, again, I'm going from 20-year-old memories, and
yeah, I'd have to look back. I find myself often surprised when I look back what I find that I didn't remember doing. But certainly, Steve and I spent a lot of time riding around in the truck talking about sewer projects, and I often would follow up.
I know that the piece of property was right next to where Jeff's Vacuum is now, I think, that we own.
Yes.
And so that was where a pump station was gonna be, if my memory serves. And the one you're talking about with workforce housing out behind MRC, you've got the, a greater chance of expansion of Richard Remsen's property over there with this happening.
Yeah.
So there's a great deal of stuff that could happen once we give the nod.
Exactly.
Would it
and when-
affect the fire, the West Rockport Fire Station?
Yeah, no, it would be good for that as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So over time, we've talked about, are we going, so right now the sewer ends at the high school. And so, we've talked, do we go out to the recreation facility? Do we go out to the intersection of Route 17? Do we go out to the town line? Do we turn up Route 17 and head out that way? So it's really starting to put some shape around all of those concepts, what they would cost, who you're serving, the just rate of return on some of that investment.
So it's a lump sum of 40,000, according to your memo here. And John, where is that 40,000 coming from?
I'm gonna let Megan take that one. we wouldn't want to let Megan not have a chance to talk.
That's right. I mean,
so
she's
I
been
wanted
here
to
the
make
whole
sure.
time, so.
We have some contingency money in our capital improvement plan, as well as some other pipe laying projects and repair projects that we could move around to fund this. This step is important now because the 80% EDA funding, we only have until March to apply for that. And we can't apply for that EDA funding without this preliminary engineering
Good
report.
to know.
And EDA funding is typically only 50%, but because of the ARPA funds that are available, they're awarding projects up to 80%. And talking with Orion, we feel confident that we could qualify up to that 80% because of job creation, because of workforce housing, and some other potential services that we could put in, depending on how that all works out. So we feel that we would be extremely eligible to receive the 80% funding in terms of EDA.
And in order to do that, we need this
We
report
have to
from.
have this.
Okay.
report.
Would the moving of the funds around in any way take money away from projects that improve the roads, repair roads, things like that?
No, because sewer operates as an enterprise fund, so only sewer can pay for sewer.
Okay.
And let me just also add, Nate talked about it, but this helps to also talk about, we're obviously having conversations about interlocal agreements, and we have a number of those agreements. This also helps to put a little bit of a clearer picture as to our gallons per, what does Rockport's flow look like? If we have that, we don't have Route 90, what does that talk about? Without that, answering that question, it seems like it's an incomplete
No.
picture without
Right.
understanding, is it feasible or not feasible? We shouldn't even talk about it if it's not feasible. If there's a feasibility there, you get 80%, that's interesting. The other piece is the $10,000 allowance for ledge profiling. This is obviously a great time. Anyone who's on Route 1 right now, you can see me drilling and blasting is going through and checking those holes. So, the timing of that is somewhat unique as well. So, this is a good time for us to really see what we have out there. We all know it's very wet. There's a lot of wetlands around there.
Yep.
But there's also, it's Rockport for a reason. So, the ledge is there.
Well, and I don't recall any recent work that's been done by the water company that might warrant a conversation with them to see if there's any partnering that we could do as they did on Route 1.
Yep. Yep.
So there's a lot of things that could go in our favor.
Yeah.
And the money that we would potentially be authorizing would give us everything we need to do what next?
Apply for the funding. For the.
Okay, so we apply for the funding, but what does that information give you as far as any engineering information? Is it good for anything else other than applying for the funding?
It would sort of be that launching point that you would go from that into detailed design if the project was funded. So it's like, as I like to say, usually costs increase as risk decreases. And so, if you move this project into detailed design, that's a pretty large effort. And you wouldn't want to do that until you know that the project was funded.
Was funded.
And out of this, we would get some sort of a rough cost estimate.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's,
Because that's how you, and
Yeah.
then the 20%, so if EDA provides the 80%, then the 20% presumably would be from a bond.
correct.
Or some other funding opportunities that we are already in discussions about. So we have options in terms that this potentially could be a no-cost project to the town if we got 80% funding.
Would be great, yeah.
So, in your presentation with this money, after you do your work, will part of that work, because I asked this stuff of Bill Nailpower before, because I wanted to know how many curb cuts or how many properties it would go by and what the revenue is just with those, and any potential revenue that might come from things you might learn from the workforce housing and any other type of thing. So will your information you provide back to us give us an idea what the revenue would be
Yes,
if nobody hooked up, plus if anybody said they would, then that would give you another, so that would come in with your report.
correct.
Perfect.
And just to speak to the question, I have a meeting tomorrow with Maine Water to start that discussion about their, what their needs might be for this project.
Well, I know that, as you said, Richard Remsen, I've been talking with him a little bit. I mean, he's very much for this. It's something to get that workforce housing and those projects developed out there, we need to have the sewer line. I mean, we can't do it without it. And in order to decrease our tax base, we need more properties, developed properties.
Right.
So over and all, I mean, this is something we definitely need to look at. And hopefully if we can get the 80 to 100% financing,
It's a no-brainer,
if
I
we can
think,
get
yeah.
this going, then Richard can start looking at what his plans would look like, and that would give us a better idea of how many hookups we're gonna be looking at, on that end as well. I mean, I think it would kind of all flow together, plus we're looking at the fire station, and, it's all gonna be a nice little package once it's done. Yeah, I really think it's something we need to put in
I
play.
agree. All right, any other questions for Nate or Megan? Then who would like to make a motion?
Do we have a second one?
Yep,
I move the board approve the preliminary engineering for Route 90 sewer extension.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor? Let's make it happen, Nate. All right, can we have a motion to go back into regular session?
I move the board exit wastewater commissioners and enter back into regular session.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? All in favor, and it is 7:50. All right, thank you, Nate, thank you, Megan. Thank you. All right, we will go into select board liaison reports. Who would like to go first?
I've got piles.
You got piles? Then let's have you go first.
I've been busy. Or somebody's been busy and I've just been getting emails, one or the other.
There you go.
These kind of actually flow together in a way. I printed out the emails if anybody wants them. I don't know if you do, but I do have copies of the emails if it's something you're interested in. Coming from from Amanda on the RES task force, a lot of kind of what came up there was, where are things at, what's our relationship? She's looking for short-term guidance going forward, because at the point we're at, as Mark had said, they've made the recommendation, now what do they do? I mean, and a lot of what's come up with that is, and Brian's been chatting, and I'm sure you're aware, I mean, a lot of this is, we've got the town vote coming up, and, just based on the budget committee vote split, the focus, I think, for the RES is to get out and be, get into the community, help with the promotion of the project, and, Amanda's big thing is why now, why are we doing this now? But it's not really a now thing, it's been sitting there for 10 years, it's just finally coming together as a project. So, I mean, overall, I think if you want to have these and read through them so you can see what Brian and Amanda were chatting about, just give some direction to where RES is actually at, and what they want to do.
Well, I wanted to interject a little on that, because I think the budget committee recommendation is really unfortunate. I think it stems from a total misunderstanding of what this
Right.
is about. And one that we need to make sure our voters
Yes.
understand, that we have made no decisions about what is gonna happen at the RES site.
Right.
This is a process to
Process.
get to that.
Right.
Because there was a misunderstanding that somehow the Economic Development Committee on their own had decided we're gonna, have a commercial development at RES and we want money to spend on that. And it was just it was unfortunate, and so we just really do need to get the word out to our
Right.
voters, and maybe we'll have a newsletter.
Yeah, so just, and that's somewhere in the emails.
Yeah, I know.
Somewhere in the emails there. So, yeah, let me just give an update of kind of what is known at this point. And so the, man, my brain's swimming on this one.
Right.
The the emails, effectively where we are is that the New Height group has, they've met with Brian and Orion and I on Zoom, effectively to kind of gauge out what do we need to know, what's the next phase. And what we've asked of them is to really sketch out in some good detail, when they come for your public hearing at your meeting, your next meeting, which is October 12th, I believe.
12th, yes.
The idea is to have them come in at that meeting and to provide a little bit of a fleshed out idea as to what it is that their public engagement process is. How are they going to reach out to our residents? Because that was one thing that came out of the budget committee conversation, was there was a lot of sense that I've never been asked, you know, what are we, is this idea something that's already come in with an idea, that it's pushing an idea that it's already, you know, it's already been decided? And really, I think what this effort is to create that plan. What does that look like? What are we going to do there? What could happen there? And New Height being a group that obviously understands development, understands, you know, what is possible in terms of the market. But the reason why, to me, why their introduction to the process, and you can speak to this, Eric, because you were obviously part of that group, but they really, I think, understood they wanted to listen and hear and engage the community. And so really, I think it's really important at your next meeting to be able to have the opportunity to understand what does that really look like? And really to tell that to, you know, our residents, so they understand before they're voting, this is what that process looks like. These are the people who are involved. And to set the stage for that, we talked about what's the committee's, the task force's role in that. And obviously, we're hiring a group to run this, this process, New Height Group, and we want them to really be the leading lead that charge, and have the task force available if questions. But that's why we have staff too, and so the staff really running that contract, ensuring that they're able to get the direction they need from the select board and myself and those who need it, and then also have the task force available where needed to be able to provide that guidance as necessary. But my feeling is that really, I mean, kind of Mark brought this up, I think, a little bit. My feeling is that once this group gets started, they're really going to be off like a top, and really trying to move ahead to really get the answers that we're looking for in terms of what does RAS look like in a future. What does the future of RAS look like, as opposed to people bringing proposals to us, trying to create that by listening and having our residents engaged in that. And that was a lot of that budget committee conversation, I think, was really some frustrations perhaps, and I don't want to overstate it, but you know, there have been efforts, public engagement efforts that the town has led and had involvement in, that I think perhaps people feel that they weren't part of that for some reason. They weren't asked, they weren't invited, they weren't engaged for whatever reason.
They weren't here.
You know, they weren't here, sure,
Right, they don't
yeah.
live here.
So I think all of those things kind of on top of one another make it a little bit of a motley mess there. But I think that's what's, to me, that's what's exciting about this, is it's a fresh start for the conversation. And I think that's why RES Task Force job in kind of teeing that up for the community to start from square one is why it's so valuable, you know? So I think, you know, trying to engage these folks who've got this to this point and keep them, you know, available, you know, almost in the bullpen, ready to help out where needed. But my feeling is our New Height Group is really going to be driving this bus.
Well, and that is good, because I think, you know, in some people's minds, there's a belief that there's certain things that, you know, certain groups, certain people would like to have there. And by having this third party come in and do a sort of a neutral canvassing and painting their own picture for us, that should ease some of those concerns. And I hope that we would speak as close to one voice as we can with the Portland group, meaning you and the RES Development Chair. I mean, that way you can be on the same page, not sending different signals by different people. You know, I don't want to create any confusion. It needs to be straightforward and let's move forward.
Yeah, and that's basically what she's asking for, you know? So whether we have to, because it's technically a, you know, a subcommittee,
Task
task
force.
force of the EDC, so we have to either direct the EDC to tell them to continue on whatever path. She's just questioning where do we go from here, and that's what I want to bring up is, you know, and their thought as it stands, at least, and from what I'm gathering, is, you know, they want to help be that voice that gets into the community to say exactly what you just said. You know, we haven't made any decisions. This is just strictly an information gathering process,
Right.
is what this is for.
Yeah.
You know, and we just need to clarify that with the community, and, you know, they're hoping to get some articles, maybe, you know, for the newsletter, just, and it's kind of in here, so I don't need to belabor it, it's just, they need some direction, so we can't leave them just hanging.
And I mean, I'm eager
No,
to,
and I, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I think they're an important component of it,
Yeah.
because they are the citizens who have been
Absolutely.
involved in this, and we have town staff, which is great, and we have the new professional neutral party coming in, but I think it's important to have.
I mean, I'm eager to have the property gone. And, I mean, it has chewed up,
That denominator a little bit.
It-
Right, right, exactly.
it's chewed up a tremendous amount of time when there are other things that we could be focusing on. And I think this group coming in and doing what they need to do to pitch it to us is great.
Yes. I agree.
But in November, if the voters say no,
Right, we've got to be
are we
prepared
ready
for
to put a
that.
for sale sign on it the next morning?
Well, we have to be prepared for that,
No, that's what I
right?
mean.
Yeah.
We need to start
really
talking about that.
do.
'Cause
We need to be
I
prepared
really
for that.
don't want to have this go down the road another year or 5,
Or 10.
because we've been X amount of time now getting to where we are.
And further to that point now, the other part of this equation, which was the recreation committee that I went
Yes.
to, and I know you've been engaged, because Barrett told me so, is MRC acquired 12 more acres, and they're in the process
Great.
of getting their environmentals and their studies all done, and they're willing to partner with the town, or however it's gonna work out, to let us put some ball fields in their space. So with the equation, the problem of, well, we're gonna lose a ball field, this is a location that we could do it, and they'd like to engage sooner than later because they're in their environmental studies with their runoffs and all that, and we don't wanna have to go back and redo their work. If we can get into it now, I don't know how that would work, but it is something we need to consider. I mean, I don't know what the costs are involved or anything, it's just, I know we were looking for something, and this has kind of fallen into our lap.
And that is one of the things that has been a drawback for this other property, is because it's always been, well, we want to keep half of it, which is fine,
Right.
but if we have an alternative so that we can market the whole piece, then that lets the people in Portland paint a bigger, better picture of what could be there.
Yeah, agree.
And I'll just, I'm meeting with Craig, Jason and Craig and I are meeting this Friday or Thursday. So so we're, it's somewhere in the emails there.
Well, I didn't print that one because I got it after it was here.
Okay, yeah.
But yes, I did know that, but I just thought that was all kind of good news. We've got the RES moving forward. You know, things are happening on that part. I think maybe if Amanda can tune in or come to our next meeting when New Height Group is here to present, and maybe Brian, just so that we've got them listen here and understanding, so that moving forward, they're on the same page without having to repeat. You know, and then having this MRC space fall and kind of just go, oh, well, we've got space, boom, right, and kind of just
Right.
fall into our lap as I'm at the meeting. You know, that's kind of solves two pieces of the puzzle at the same time.
That's great.
So
All right.
that's
Any
it for
other
me.
committee updates for you? It's a lot of good information.
And that was a good one, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's very good. Mark?
It was quiet on the island. I missed you guys. Nothing here.
All right, thank you. I'll go, just brief comprehensive plan, committee did not meet last week due to some scheduling conflicts, so they are due to meet here coming up, I think on the 30th. So, and West Rockport Fire Station hasn't met, so I have a very light update. Denise?
Let's see, parks, things are going strong. There's lots of good things happening in town. We've got the gift from Doug, Doug and Pat, but we also, are going through the analysis of the various parks and how we can improve those and make those more accessible for the community. The Mid-Coast Internet Development Corporation, the broadband group, thanks to Diane Hamilton and John, we've got a very impressive application into the county for $750,000 of the ARPA grants. The county's meeting.
And are they meeting tomorrow?
They're meeting
Okay.
tomorrow. I don't think they'll make any decisions,
Okay.
but they'll talk about what their process might be going forward. And then Legacy Rockport is,
Do we know how many perhaps have asked?
I think there were 21
Yeah, right around
applications.
20, yeah.
No one request, yeah?
Yeah.
Ranging all sizes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we were the we were the last envelope on the top of
So we're on the top
On
of the
the
stack.
Like, fresh eyes.
Top of the stack, we like that.
Well,
John?
There's been some movements on EMS that actually John could probably speak better to than I can, just about the contractor situation.
Well, there've been some concerns raised. We've had, as I noted in my report, we've had a lot of accidents
Sure have,
over the
yeah.
past, 6 weeks, middle of the summer. And, a number of those instances, we've had some, I would say some concerns raised in terms of the availability of EMS and decisions made and the like. And so it's, I think we met, Jason Peasley, the fire chief, and I met with Rick Petrie and John Powers from Northeast Mobile Health to discuss some of these concerns, and in particular one issue where I think Chief Peasley had some concerns that some calls made on the ground were really not the best decision and delayed care that could have been, I think, better, perhaps hindsight being 2020. We talked those issues out. I don't want to get into the this and that, but I would say that from Chief Peasley's perspective, things had gone quite well over a period of time, perhaps because the pandemic had calmed the number of calls and the like. Unfortunately, with the amount of traffic that we saw this summer, issues have cropped up in terms of the quality of care and timeliness and so forth. There is a desire for the four communities to meet as a part of the EMS group that meets quarterly, is due to meet quarterly. And there's towns that have signed on to, I think it's the fourth Thursday of the month, I think it is, or it might be Wednesday. I'll get the times to the both of you, because I know both of you were on that, Mark and John here. But there's also concerns about what had come out of the study that was accomplished between Camden and Rockport, and then eventually Lincolnville and Hope as well, and Northeast and Penn Bay Medical Center, in terms of the next phase of what EMS looks like and how to move forward. And that's a little bit less defined. The study called for the four communities to hire a planner. That hasn't happened, but there also hasn't been a meeting of the EMS group in
Quite some
2
time,
years.
right?
2 years.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to make those decisions when everyone's operating independently. But obviously, I think from Chief Beasley's perspective, and I think just look at, this is a conversation that needs to happen one way or the other. Whatever the solution may be, it's a conversation that needs to occur so that there's some there's some resolution on a four-town basis as to what the best foot forward is for all of us. You know, Rockport's decision may be different than Camden's or Hope's or Lincoln Mills, but, you need to be in the room, or at least the same Zoom call, to talk those things out. So it's unfortunate, it's been 2 years when Zoom was available to all of us, but here we are. So, so I think in the next, yeah, I think, like I said, the fourth Wednesday, I think is the time that they've been throwing out, so
Of this month, or will it be
I'll,
October?
I think it's this month, yes.
Okay, so like the
yes.
29th or something
Yeah,
like that, okay.
That's it, yeah.
Okay.
But I'll double check and I'll get back to you. I just got the email about it last week, so.
Okay.
Butch from Northeast was organizing that call. Because the contract actually calls for them to bring the
Do it.
four towns together.
Right, okay. All right.
Yeah, I think you know, and part of that is, I think we're supposed to have a meeting in January to get ready for the next
Right.
extension of the contract.
Yes.
And I mean, you know, I really don't like to hear people pissing and moaning when they won't come to the table and talk about it. So we've gotta get to the table, we've gotta talk about it, everybody's gotta be on some page, but we've all gotta be together.
And one thing I should also add to that is that the chiefs, the fire chiefs of the four towns are organizing to meet with Northeast monthly about concerns and issues. Part of the issue is that some of those EMS meetings, even early on, really became more about quality control, which is really not something select board members and managers and administrators are necessarily great at. We're not medical professionals in any way. But those on the fire ground do understand that world far better than we do. So the idea is on a monthly basis to have that communication as a way to really bridge that gap, because the study quite clearly showed that that was a chief failing of the current system, is that no one is talking to each other, or that the communications that are happening are not the most productive. So we need to open those lines of communication, we need to keep people talking, and, you know, at least we can answer, you can't say that's fixed, but at least we can know you knew the problem existed. So, that's at least my hope, moving forward, we've got something to begin with.
All right, any other committee updates, John?
Should just make
Oh,
one
go
more
ahead.
question on the rec committee. I just want to say, after not meeting for 2 years, the meeting went very
That's
well.
great, all right.
So
guys are moving mountains here.
It was done very well, and I think with the current group of people that are on it, especially since each one of them is in charge of like one of the groups of players and different organizations.
Nice.
And it looks like a few things will be donated to help bring that park up to space, and hopefully I don't know how that meeting turned out, but the fencing won't be costing us the big money that we had, so some of those reserves can be used for other more immediate needs. So the fencing isn't as big of a problem as we thought.
Oh,
Great.
that's beautiful.
That's great.
So, yeah, Tom Fence came out and said, yeah, most of it doesn't need to be replaced. There's segments that need to be fixed, but the overall is not where we thought. So,
And that-
going forward, I think we're looking in a better spot.
And that's part of that capital improvement committee having another block of, you know, this is what we have currently in our reserve, this is what we ultimately would need. But if we fixed it tomorrow, this is what it would cost you,
Yeah,
you know, because we're aiming for 2,000 in that field, 200,000.
yeah, it's not
And
that.
we had 55 and it only took,
Yeah, it's gonna I don't know, he was getting the numbers, but.
I mean, it's certainly gonna cost a lot less than $200,000.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
That's great.
totally, so.
It's just maintenance, it's just
Yeah.
keeping up with things,
Yeah, and since it hadn't been done in some time,
yeah,
things are looking good, and he's got some donations lined up, so
Great,
wonderful.
that should help us out a lot there.
I love it. All right, anything else?
Nope.
All right, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I heard it.
Stereo where available.
All right, you're available. All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you all.
7:54. thank you all.
Good meeting. So we
Just as a
have-
reminder, the next meeting is gonna be on a Tuesday because of.
The holiday.
Because of the holiday on Monday, Indigenous People Day. So that will be October 12th.
So,
Can we name